The massive alien warship broke through the clouds like a metal mountain falling. From the sky, it was called the Throne of Stars, and it belonged to the Velari Empire. The ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Its dark silver hull stretched for nearly 2 miles, and strange lights pulsed along its surface like a heartbeat. Commander Jake Miller stood in the hangar bay of Earth's orbital station, watching the ship approach through the reinforced windows. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that told stories of war. A long scar ran from his left eyebrow down to his jaw. His short brown hair was starting to show gray at the sides, even though he was only 42 years old. War did that to people. Behind him stood a small group of humans. There was Ambassador Emma Collins, a sharp woman in her 50s with kind eyes, but a voice that could cut through steel when she needed it. Next to her was Lieutenant Tom Hayes, Jake's second in command and closest friend. Tom was younger, maybe 30, with red hair and freckles that made him look like a boy. But Jake knew better. Tom had saved his life twice during the colony wars. Big ship, Tom said quietly. Big ego, Jake replied without turning around. Velari Empire had ruled 40 star systems for over 10,000 years. They had built great cities on distant worlds while humans were still learning to make fire. When humanity finally reached the stars, the Velari watched them with a mix of curiosity and amusement. To them, humans were children playing in a sandbox while adults ran the universe. But humans had proven themselves useful. They were tough, adaptable, and willing to fight. So the Velari had agreed to this diplomatic exchange. They would share some of their technology, and in return they wanted to study humanity up close. It was not a partnership of equals. Everyone knew that, but it was a start. The Throne of Stars docked with a deep rumble that shook the entire station. Jake felt it in his bones. He straightened his uniform and put his hands behind his back. His job was simple. He was the military liaison. He would stand watch, protect, and stay quiet unless someone asked him a question. Diplomacy was not his strength. Fighting was. The massive doors of the hangar bay slid open, and cold air rushed in from the docking tunnel. Then they came. The Velari were beautiful in a strange and unsettling way. They stood nearly 7 feet tall with silver skin that seemed to glow faintly in the light. Each of them had 4 arms, 2 on each side, and they moved with a grace that made humans look clumsy in comparison. Their eyes were large and black like polished stones, and they showed no emotion at all. First came the soldiers. They wore armor made of some dark material that seemed to drink in the light. They carried weapons that hummed with energy, and they moved in perfect formation without making a sound. Jake counted 20 of them. Each one looked capable of killing everyone in the room without breaking a sweat. Then came the advisors. They wore flowing robes of deep purple and blue, and they carried tablets that glowed with alien writing. They whispered to each other in their strange language, a series of clicks and musical tones that human ears could barely understand. And then she appeared, Queen Sarah, ruler of the Velari Empire, sovereign of 40 worlds, commander of a million ships. She was old. Jake could see that in the way she moved, slower than the others, more careful. Her silver skin had faded to a pale gray, and lines crossed her face like cracks in ancient stone. But her eyes were sharp. They swept across the room and saw everything. they saw the fear hiding. Behind the smiles, they saw the weapons concealed under jackets. They saw Jake for a moment. Their eyes met. Jake felt something cold run down his spine. It was like being looked at by a mountain or an ocean or some other force of nature that did not care if you lived or died. Then the Queen looked away and Jake remembered to breathe. Behind the Queen came another figure. She was younger, much younger, and she walked with the confidence of someone who had never been told no. Her silver skin was bright and perfect. Her forearms moved with deliberate grace, each gesture designed to draw attention. Her black eyes sparkled with something that might have been intelligence or might have been cruelty. Probably both. This was Princess Vaylina, youngest daughter of Queen Sareth. Jake had read the briefing files. Princess was 300 years old, which was young for Athari. She had commanded armies, won battles, and crushed rebellions. She was also famous for her pride and her sharp tongue. The files warned that she considered humans to be slightly above insects and slightly below entertainment. Ambassador Collins stepped forward and bowed her head in the traditional Velari greeting. Your Majesty, Your Highness, welcome to Earth Station 1. We are honored by your presence. Queen Sarah inclined her head slightly. When she spoke, her voice was deep and smooth, like stones rolling in a river. Ambassador Collins, we thank you for your hospitality. We look forward to learning much about your people. Princess Vaylina said nothing. She was too busy looking around the hangar bay with an expression of faint disgust, like someone who had stepped in something unpleasant. The delegation began moving toward the guest quarters. Jake fell into step behind them, keeping his distance, watching everything. He noticed how the Velari soldiers kept their hands near their weapons. He noticed how the advisors whispered and pointed at human technology with expressions of pity. He noticed how Princess Vaylina's eyes lingered on the human guards with something like hunger. Tom appeared at his side. 3 days of this, he muttered. Think we can survive? Jake did not answer. He was watching Princess Vaylina, who had stopped to examine a human soldier standing at attention near the door. She circled him slowly, like a cat examining a mouse. The soldier stared straight ahead, sweat forming on his forehead. Interesting, Vaylina said loud enough for everyone to hear. They almost look like real people. A few area advisors laughed softly. The human delegation pretended not to hear. Jake's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists behind his back, but he said nothing. He did nothing. That was his job. Stand, watch, stay quiet. But somewhere deep inside him, in the place where he kept all the memories of blood and fire and screaming, something stirred, something that remembered what it felt like to be underestimated, something that knew with absolute certainty that pride always came before a fall. He did not know it yet, but the next 3 days would change everything. Not just for him, not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The game had begun, and the Velari had no idea what they were playing with. The banquet hall was the most beautiful room on Earth. Station 1, crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting soft light across tables covered in white cloth and golden plates. Flowers from 6 different planets filled vases along the walls, their sweet smell mixing in the air. Human musicians played soft classical music in the corner, their violins and cello singing gentle Melodies, it was the second night of the diplomatic visit, and everyone was pretending to be friends. Commander Jake Miller stood near the entrance, his back against the wall, his eyes moving slowly. Across the room, he wore his dress uniform, dark blue with silver buttons and medals that he never talked about. His job tonight was the same as always. Watch, protect, stay quiet. The Velari delegates sat at the main table with the human leaders. Queen Sareth was speaking with Ambassador Collins about trade, agreements and technology exchanges. Her voice was calm and measured, and she listened more than she talked. Jake noticed that about her. She was a watcher like him. Princess Velina sat next to her mother, but she was not listening. She was bored. Jake could see it in the way she played with her food, pushing it around her plate with one of her 4 hands she had barely touched. Her wine, her black eyes wandered around the room looking for something interesting, looking for entertainment. Those eyes found Jake. He felt her gaze like a cold wind. He did not react. He kept his face blank and his body still. He had learned long ago how to disappear while standing in plain sight. It was a useful skill when people were shooting at you. It was also useful at parties, but Velina was not looking for invisible people. She was looking for a target. She stood up from the table, ignoring the conversation around her. Her long silver robes flowed behind her as she walked across the room. The music seemed to grow quieter. People stopped talking and turned to watch. When a princess moved, everyone paid attention. She stopped in front of Jake, so she said, her voice carrying through the suddenly silent room, "This is the famous human warrior." Lord Jake met her eyes. "Your Highness." Commander Jake Miller, Velina continued, circling him slowly. "I have heard stories about you. They say you are one of Earth's finest soldiers. They say you have won many battles." She paused, looking him up and down like she was examining a piece of furniture. "I must say I am disappointed," Jake said. "Nothing, you are so small," Velina said. "So fragile. Look at you. One good hit would break those thin bones. One cut would spill that red blood all over this nice clean floor." She reached out with one slender finger and poked his chest. "I have seen training dummies with more impressive bodies." The human delegation was frozen. Ambassador Collins started to rise from her seat, but Jake caught her eye and shook his head slightly. This was not her fight. It was not anyone's fight. Not yet. Velina smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Your species lives such short, sad lives." "What is it?" 80 years, 90 if you are lucky. My pet insects live longer than that. I had a little creature once, a beautiful thing with wings like glass. It lived for 200 years before it died. That is still longer than any human has ever lived." She turned to address the room, spreading all 4 arms wide like an actor on a stage, "And yet they call themselves warriors," she announced. "The Velari were building empires while these creatures were still throwing rocks at each other. We had conquered 20-star systems before humans even learned to fly. We had art, music, and poetry while they were painting stick figures on cave walls." Some of the Velari advisors laughed. The human soldiers standing guard around the room shifted uncomfortably. Tom Hayes took a step forward, his face red with anger. But Jake held up one hand to stop him. Velina noticed. "Oh, how sweet. Your friend wants to defend your honor. Does he know that I have killed enemy commanders with my bare Hands, does he know that I have led armies into battle while he was still learning to walk? She turned back to Jake, moving closer, her face inches from his. Tell me, Commander, have your people ever faced a true enemy, or do you only fight among yourselves like animals? I have studied your history. So many wars, so much killing, brother against brother, nation against nation. You are not warriors, you are children who never learned to stop hitting each other. Jake remained silent, his face showed nothing, but inside, deep in his chest, something old and dark was waking up. Nothing to say. Velina laughed. Of course not. What could you possibly say? You know I am right. You know your species is weak. You survive only because the galaxy has not bothered to step on you yet. You are ants at the feet of giants, and you do not even know it. Queen Sera was watching from the table. Her ancient eyes were fixed on Jake, studying him with an intensity that her daughter was too arrogant to notice. The queen had lived for 4,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had learned to recognize danger in all its forms. And right now, looking at this silent human soldier, she saw something that made her very, very nervous. But Velina saw nothing. She was too busy enjoying herself. I think, she said loudly, that humans should not be allowed to call themselves warriors anymore. It is an insult to real warriors everywhere. Perhaps we should give you a new name. Something more fitting. How about pets? Or toys, or maybe just food? The Velari advisors laughed again, louder this time. Jake finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but somehow it cut through the laughter like a knife. Are you finished? Your Highness. Velina blinked for a moment. Surprise flickered across her silver face. No one spoke to her like that. No one dared. Excuse me, I asked if you are finished, Jake repeated. Because if you are, I would like to return to my duties. There is a room full of important people here, and I am supposed to be protecting them, even the ones who do not deserve it. The room went completely silent. Even the musicians stopped playing. Princess Velina stared at Jake. Her black eyes grew hard as stone. Her four hands curled into fists at her sides. You dare, she whispered, you dare speak to me that way? Jake met her gaze without flinching. I meant no disrespect, Your Highness. I am simply a soldier doing his job. I apologize if my presence offends you. But his eyes told a different story. His eyes said something that words could not express. Something ancient and primal, something that warned her in a language older than speech that she was playing a very dangerous game. Velina saw it for just a moment. She saw it, and for just a moment she felt something she had not felt in 300 years, fear. But then the moment passed and her pride swallowed it whole. We shall see, she said coldly. We shall see exactly what kind of warrior you are. She turned and walked back to her seat, her robe sweeping behind her, but her hands were shaking slightly, and she did not know why. Queen Sera watched her daughter return, then looked back at Jake one more time. The old queen did not smile, but something in her eyes changed, something that might have been respect or might have been warning. The music started again. The conversations resumed. The banquet continued as if nothing had happened, but everything had changed. Everyone in that room knew it. A line had been crossed, a challenge had been issued, and sooner or later it would have to be answered. Jake returned to his position against the wall. His face was calm, his breathing was steady, but Deep inside him, the old darkness was fully awake now, and it was hungry. The silence in the banquet hall lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like hours. Princess Velina stood at the main table, her silver face tight with anger that she could barely control. The human soldier had spoken back to her. He had looked at her without fear. He had made her feel small, even for just a moment. That was something she could not forgive. I have decided, she announced, her voice ringing through the hall like a bell, that words are not enough. Talk is cheap, as the humans say. If this Commander Miller is truly a warrior, then let him prove it. Queen Sarah looked up from her conversation with Ambassador Collins, her ancient eyes narrowed slightly. Velina, this is a diplomatic mission. We did not come here to fight. I'm not talking about a fight, Mother, Velina replied smoothly. I am talking about a demonstration, a friendly competition between warriors. What better way to build understanding between our peoples than to see each other's combat skills? Ambassador Collins frowned. Your Highness, I'm not sure that is appropriate. Commander Miller is here as a liaison, not an entertainer. Are you saying he cannot do it? Velina asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Is he afraid? Perhaps human warriors are only brave when they are shooting unarmed civilians from a distance. The insult hung in the air like poison. Several human soldiers took steps forward, their hands moving toward their weapons. Tom Hayes looked ready to explode. Even Ambassador Collins, who had spent 30 years keeping her temper under control, looked like she wanted to punch someone. But Jake just walked forward, moving through the crowd until he stood in the center of the room. His face was calm, his voice was steady. I accept. The room erupted in whispers. Velina's eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with pleasure. She had expected him to refuse. She had expected to watch him squirm and make excuses. This was even better. Wonderful, she said. Then let us go to the combat arena. The Throne of Stars has excellent facilities for such demonstrations. Queen Sarah raised one hand. Velina, I must advise against this. You do not know what you are dealing with. I know exactly what I am dealing with, Mother, Velina replied. A small, weak creature who thinks he can stand against the Velari. I will teach him the truth of the universe. It will be a valuable lesson for all humans. The Queen said nothing more, but her eyes followed Jake as the crowd began moving toward the docking tunnel. There was something in that look, concern perhaps, or maybe something darker. Maybe she already knew how this would end. The combat arena on the Throne of Stars was massive. It was a circular room, nearly 100 ft across, with walls made of some black metal that seemed to absorb light. The floor was smooth and gray, marked with strange symbols that glowed faintly blue. Around the edges, raised platforms provided seating for observers. Holographic screens floated in the air, ready to display scores and statistics. The Velari had been fighting in places like this for thousands of years. They had turned combat into an art form, with rules and traditions and honored techniques passed down through generations. Every Yungari noble learned to fight before they learned to read. Jake looked around the arena with quiet interest. He had fought in places like this before, not as fancy, of course. His arenas had been muddy trenches and burning cities and the cold vacuum of space. But the basic idea was the same. 2 People enter, one person wins. Velina walked to a rack of weapons on the far wall. She selected a ceremonial blade, curved sword about 3 feet long with an edge that hummed with blue energy. It was beautiful and deadly, designed for speed and precision. In the hands of a master, it could cut through steel like paper. Choose your weapon, Commander, she said, gesturing to the rack. Jake looked at the weapons. There were swords, staffs, energy lances, and several things he did not recognize. All of them looked expensive. All of them looked dangerous. No, thank you, he said. I will fight without weapon. The Velari observers gasped. Velina stared at him like he had grown a second head. You cannot be serious. You want to face me with your bare hands? Yes, that is suicide. This blade can cut through armor. It can cut through bone. One touch and you are dead. Jake shrugged. Then I will try not to let it touch me. Tom Hayes pushed through the crowd. Commander, you cannot do this. Let me fight instead. I am younger, faster. You do not have to prove anything to these people. Jake put a hand on his friend's shoulder. It has to be me, Tom. She challenged me. If someone else fights, she will say I was too afraid. This is the only way. But sir, trust me. Tom looked into Jake's eyes and saw something there that he had not seen in a long time. Not since the war, not since the darkest days when death was everywhere and hope was nowhere. He saw the cold, calculating mind of a man who had survived things that would break most people. He stepped back. Give her hell, sir. Jake smiled slightly. It was not a happy smile. I intend to. He walked to the center of the arena, removing his formal jacket as he went. He dropped it on the floor and rolled up the sleeves of his gray undershirt. For the first time, everyone could see his arms clearly. The whispers stopped. Room went silent. Jake's arms were covered in scars. Not small scars, not neat scars. These were the marks of a man who had been cut, burned, beaten, and broken more times than anyone could count. They were thick and white against his skin, crossing over each other like a road map of pain. Some looked like knife wounds, some looked like burns, and some, the worst ones, looked like something with claws had tried to tear him apart. By the stars, one of the Velari advisors whispered, "What happened to him, Queen?" Sarah leaned forward in her seat, her eyes fixed on Jake with new intensity. She had seen warriors before. She had seen soldiers from 100 different species, but she had never seen scars like those. Each one was a story. Each one was a battle that this human had fought and survived. Velina hesitated for just a moment, then she raised her chin proudly. Scars mean nothing. They only prove that you were too slow to avoid being hit. Jake did not respond. He simply stood in the center of the arena, his hands loose at his sides, his breathing slow and steady. He looked like a man waiting for a bus. He looked like a man who had all the time in the world. Are you ready? The arena's automatic voice asked in both languages. Velina raised her sword and dropped into a fighting stance. I am going to enjoy this. Jake looked at her. His eyes were calm, empty like windows into a void where normal human emotions did not exist. Begin, he said quietly. Energy blade hummed as Velina prepared to strike. The observers held their breath. The holographic screens began recording, and somewhere deep inside Jake Miller, in the place where he kept all his ghosts, something smiled. It was time to remind the galaxy why humans were not to be underestimated. It was time to show them what a real warrior looked like. Princess Velina moved like lightning. One moment she was standing across the arena, her blade held high. The next moment she was a blur of silver skin and flashing steel, crossing the distance between them faster than a human eye could follow. Her forearms worked in perfect harmony, the sword spinning through the air in deadly patterns that she had practiced for 300 years. She aimed for his throat, killing strike, no mercy, no warning. But Jake was not there. He had moved. Not fast, not dramatically. He had simply stepped to the side at exactly the right moment, and the blade whistled past his neck, missing by less than an inch. Velina spun, already launching her second attack, a sweeping cut aimed at his legs. Jake stepped over it like he was walking over a puddle. The Velari observers murmured in confusion. This was not possible. Velina was one of the finest warriors in the Empire. Her technique was flawless. Her speed was legendary. She had killed soldiers from a dozen different species, enemies who were bigger, stronger, and more experienced than this small human, but she could not touch him. She attacked again and again, her sword singing through the air in beautiful arcs of blue light. Each strike was perfect. Each strike should have ended the fight, and each strike found nothing but empty space. Jake moved like water flowing around stones. He did not block, he did not dodge dramatically. He just was not where the blade was. His feet barely seemed to shift. His breathing remained slow and steady. To someone watching from the outside, it looked almost lazy, like a man avoiding raindrops without bothering to hurry. But Queen Sarah, watching from her elevated seat, saw the truth. Her ancient eyes, trained by 4,000 years of watching warriors, saw what her daughter could not see. He was not avoiding her attacks, he was letting her attack. He was studying her, learning her patterns, counting her breaths. Every movement she made gave him information. Every strike she threw showed him another weakness. He was not fighting, he was waiting. The queen gripped the arms of her chair. Stop the match, she said quietly. What? An advisor leaned closer. Your Majesty. Stop the match, she repeated. My daughter does not know what she is facing. He is playing with her, but it was too late. In the arena, Velina was beginning to panic. Sweat dripped from her silver face. Her breathing was ragged. She had been attacking with all her strength for nearly 2 minutes, and she had not touched him once, not once. Her arms burned with exhaustion. Her lungs screamed for air, and still he stood there calm as a statue, watching her with those empty eyes. Stand still, she screamed. Stand still and fight. Jake did not respond. He simply waited. Velina roared with rage and launched her most powerful attack. She put everything into it, all 4 arms working together, the blade spinning so fast it became a circle of blue light. It was the killing technique she had learned from her mother, the strike that had ended the Zareth War, the movement that had killed 1,000 enemies. Jake caught her wrist. The arena went silent. The holographic screens froze. Every person in the room stopped breathing. He had moved so fast that no one had seen it happen. One moment Velina was attacking, the next moment Jake's hand was wrapped around her wrist like a steel band, stopping the blade an inch from his throat. His grip was not gentle. The bones in her wrist ground together and pain shot up her arm. Then in one smooth motion he redirected her momentum, twisted her arm and took the sword from her hand as easily as taking candy from a child. She stumbled forward off balance, his foot swept her legs out from under her, and she crashed to the floor with a sound that echoed through the silent arena. Before she could move, before she could think, his boot was pressed against her throat. Not hard, not enough to hurt. Just enough to hold her in place, just enough to show her that he could kill her whenever he wanted. Jake looked down at the princess of the Villari Empire, lying helpless at his feet, and when he spoke, his voice carried through the arena like a funeral bell. In the colony wars, he said, I fought for 7 years, 7 years of watching friends die, 7 years of blood and fire and screaming. I buried 300 soldiers under my command, 300 men and women who trusted me to keep them alive. I remember every single one of their names. He paused. The silence was absolute. I was captured twice, he continued. The first time they tortured me for 6 months trying to get information. They broke my bones. They burned my skin. They did things to me that I do not have words for. I did not talk. The second time I killed 12 guards with my bare hands and walked 100 miles through a frozen desert to reach friendly territory. I lost 3 toes to frostbite. I do not feel cold anymore. Velina stared up at him, her black eyes wide with terror. This was not the weak creature she had mocked. This was not the fragile human she had dismissed. This was something else entirely, something old, something dark, something that had been forged in fire and pain and had come out the other side as something more than human. You asked if my people have ever faced a true enemy. Jake said, let me answer you. We have faced enemies that would make your worst nightmares seem like children's stories. We have fought wars that lasted generations. We have killed millions of our own kind and kept fighting. We have survived plagues, famines, natural disasters, and the cold emptiness of space. We have done things that would break any other species, and we are still here. He leaned down slightly, his eyes boring into hers. Humans do not live long, he said softly. You were right about that. 80 years. Maybe 90 if we are lucky, but that is why we are dangerous. We do not have time to wait. We do not have time to be patient. Every moment matters to us. Every breath counts, so we learn to make the most of what we have. We learn to fight harder, think faster, and never, ever give up. He removed his foot from her throat and offered his hand to help her up. We are not conquerors, he said. We never wanted to rule the galaxy. We just want to survive, and we will do whatever it takes to make that happen. We will befriend anyone who treats us with respect, but we will destroy anyone who thinks we are prey. Velina did not take his hand. She scrambled backward, pushing herself away from him like he was a wild animal. Her silver face was pale with shock. Her entire body was shaking. She had wanted to teach humans a lesson. Instead, she had learned one herself, a lesson that would stay with her for the rest of her very long life. Jake turned and walked back toward the edge of the arena. Tom Hayes met him there, handing him his jacket. That was impressive, sir, Tom said quietly. Maybe a little scary. Jake pulled on his jacket and adjusted the collar. Sometimes you have to speak a language people understand. Fear is universal. Behind them, Velina was getting to her feet. Her hands were still trembling. Her pride was shattered but deep in her black eyes. Something new was beginning to grow, not just fear, not just respect, something more complicated than either of those things. Queen Sera rose from her seat and began descending the steps toward the arena floor. Her ancient face was impossible to read, but her eyes never left Jake Miller. The match was over. The demonstration was complete, but the real conversation was just about to begin, and the fate of two species hung in the balance. Princess Velina stood in the center of the arena, her silver robes dusty from the floor, her pride bleeding from a wound that would never fully heal. For 300 years she had been treated like a goddess. For 300 years she had never lost a fight, never been challenged, never been made to feel small. Now she stood there defeated by a creature she had called an insect, and every eye in the room was watching her. Humiliation, rage boiled up inside her. Like lava from a volcano, it filled her chest, her throat, her mind. It burned away her fear and replaced it with something darker, something more dangerous. Guards, she screamed, raising one shaking hand toward Jake. Size him. Seize the human. 6 Velari soldiers stepped forward, their weapons charging with a high-pitched whine. Blue light gathered at the tips of their rifles. They were elite warriors, trained since birth to kill without hesitation. One word from the princess, and they would reduce Jake Miller to ash. The human soldiers raised their own weapons. Tom Hayes stepped in front of Jake, his face hard as stone. Ambassador Collins moved toward the edge of the arena, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. Your Highness, please, Collins said. This was a friendly demonstration. There is no need for violence. He humiliated me, Velina shrieked. Her voice echoed off the black walls like the scream of a wounded animal. He made a fool of me in front of my own people. I am a princess of the Velari Empire. I have conquered worlds. I will not be treated like this by some pathetic, short-lived creature. She pointed at Jake, her forearms trembling with fury. I will have your head mounted on my wall, she hissed. I will burn your planet to glass. I will make your entire species pay for what you have done to me. Today, do you hear me? Do you understand? Jake stood calmly behind Tom, his hands at his sides, his face showing nothing. He had heard threats like this before. He had heard them from warlords and terrorists and madmen across the galaxy. They did not frighten him. Words were just air. It was actions that mattered. But then another voice cut through the chaos, a voice like thunder rolling across mountains, a voice that had commanded empires for 4,000 years. Enough. Queen Sera descended the final steps and walked onto the arena floor. She moved slowly, her ancient body creaking with age, but every step carried the weight of absolute authority. The guards froze. The advisors fell silent. Even Velina, lost in her rage, stopped screaming and turned to face her mother. The queen walked past the guards, past the human delegation, past everyone until she stood directly between her daughter and Jake Miller. Her black eyes were cold. Her silver face was hard as iron, but she was not looking at Jake. She was looking at her daughter, Neil. Immediately she said. Velina blinked. Mother, I do not understand. The human has insulted our honor. He has made a mockery of the Empire. You should be punishing him, not defending him. Neil immediately. But, Mother, I am a princess of the blood. I do not kneel to anyone. I kneel. The word was not loud. It did not need to B. It carried the force of 4,000 years of rule. It carried the memory of a million battles won. It carried the promise that disobedience would bring consequences too terrible to imagine. Princess Vaylina, conqueror of 12 worlds, commander of armies, third in line for the throne of the greatest empire the galaxy had ever known, dropped to her knees like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Better, Queen Sarah said. She turned to face the room, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. Let it be known throughout the empire, she announced. Let it be written in the histories and taught in the schools. Let it be spoken of in every corner of every world we rule. The humans are not to be mocked. They are not weak. They are not prey. She turned back to Jake, and for the first time something like admiration flickered in her ancient eyes. Commander Miller, on behalf of the Velari Empire, I apologize for my daughter's disgraceful behavior. She was wrong to challenge you. She was wrong to insult your people. She was wrong in every way. That matters. Jake inclined his head. Respectfully, Your Majesty, I hold no anger toward the princess. She is young. The young often make mistakes. It is how they learn. Behind him, Tom let out a small snort of laughter that he quickly turned into a cough. Queen Sarah smiled slightly. It was the first time anyone had seen her smile. It made her look almost kind, almost human. You are gracious in victory, Commander. That is the mark of a true warrior. She gestured for her daughter to rise. Vaylina will learn from this day. I will make certain of it. The princess stood slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Her face burned with shame, but somewhere beneath the shame, beneath the wounded pride, something new was growing. Understanding, respect, the beginning of wisdom. I believe, the queen continued, that my daughter should have the opportunity to learn more about human culture, about human strength, about the things that make your species so remarkable. She looked at Ambassador Collins. With your permission, I would like to assign Vaylina as an attaché to Earth's military command for the next year. She will serve under Commander Miller's supervision. Ambassador Collins looked surprised, then thoughtful, then pleased. That is a generous offer, Your Majesty. I believe we can arrange something appropriate. Vaylina's head snapped up. Mother, you cannot be serious. You want me to serve under the human like a common soldier? I want you to learn, the queen replied calmly. I want you to understand what true strength looks like. It is not about winning every fight. It is not about having the biggest army or the fastest ships. It is about surviving. It is about adapting. It is about refusing to give up. No matter how bad things get. She looked at Jake one last time. The humans know this. They have always known it, and that is why they are not to be underestimated. Jake stepped forward and did something that surprised everyone in the room. He extended his hand toward Vaylina, not in a gesture of victory, not in a gesture of superiority, simply as one warrior offering respect to another. I look forward to working with you, Your Highness, he said. I think you might find that humans are more interesting than you expected. Vaylina stared at the hand for a long moment. Her pride told her to slap it away. Her anger told her to spit in his face, but something deeper, something wiser made her reach out and take it. His grip was firm and warm. There were calluses on his palm from years of holding weapons. There was strength in his fingers that could have crushed her bones, but his touch was Gentle, respectful perhaps, she said. Quietly, perhaps I will, the tension in the room slowly dissolved. Weapons were lowered, breathing resumed. The crisis had passed as the delegations began to file out of the arena. Tom Hayes fell into step beside Jake. Think she will really learn anything, sir? He asked, or will she go back to being a pain in the neck as soon as she gets home? Jake watched Velina walking beside her mother, her head bowed, her silver face still flushed with embarrassment. But there was something different about her now, something in the way she moved, the way she carried herself. Arrogance was still there, but it was mixed with something else, uncertainty, curiosity, the beginnings of respect. She will learn, Jake said, the hard way. Probably, but she will learn, and the rest of the Velari, you think they got the message? Jake looked around the arena at the alien faces watching him. Some looked angry, some looked confused, but most of them looked thoughtful, impressed, maybe even a little afraid. They got it, he said. They will spread the word. The humans are not to be messed with. The humans fight back. The humans do not know how to quit. He paused at the exit, looking back one last time at the arena where he had just changed the course of galactic history. That is all we ever wanted, he said quietly. Not to rule anyone, not to conquer anything, just to be treated with respect, just to be left alone. Tom smiled. Think that is too much to ask? Jake thought about all the wars humanity had fought, all the enemies they had faced, all the times they had been knocked down and gotten back up again. It used to be, he said, but not anymore. Not after today. They walked out of the arena together, leaving behind a room full of aliens who would never look at humans the same way again. The galaxy was watching. The galaxy was learning. And humanity was just getting started.